This week's sponsor is all about a new world setting that they are building. D20 Saga. It's a monthly magazine on Dungeons & Dragons written by Ed Greenwood, Bruce Nesmith and Troy Danning. Great names in D&D. It's a patron-only magazine and issue 1 drops this month. Find it here, www.patreon.com/D20 Saga. Each month, a unique adventure drops that connects with the previous month's adventure to create a long-term campaign from level 1 to 20. You also get new mechanics, rules, and resources like NPCs, items, classes, races, monsters. There are also map packs and tokens included and full VTT integration. And a new world setting, Lacrima, will unfold before you in each monthly edition. It's cosmic fantasy and just bursting with ideas that are cool and exciting. Thank you, D20 Saga, for sponsoring today's video.
You want to create your own world space and a campaign to sit inside of it. Well, so do I, as a matter of fact. So join me as we kick off this new series on how to be a great GM, where we are literally building a campaign and a world for that campaign to sit in. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy. I've already outlined what we're going to be doing, so let's jump straight into it. But before we do, smack that like button if you like this concept. That's the only way that we know that we should be making more of these, by the way. Okay, moving on. Where do we start with designing a world space? I've done lots of videos before on this. I'm going to be explaining to you the concepts, and then I'm going to be showing you the example as I do it myself, so that you can work through it with me. So we are starting with the very fundamentals of the universe. That is where we have to start, of course. Once we've chosen a genre. The genre could be science fiction, it could be modern, it could be historical, or it could be magical. We're going to choose fantasy, because fantasy is something that everybody loves. We all love fantasy, and fantasy raises a whole lot of questions which really are appropriate to all of the other genres, but translate easier that way rather than t'other. So where do we start? We start with magic. Magic is a fundamental core of fantasy. Without fantasy, it's historical. Fantasy is at its very base about a fantastical environment, and a fantastical environment generally involves magic, or beings that would only exist in a magical kind of environment. So magic is at its core, so we need to understand magic. Within magic, I say that there are 3 things that you need to look at and understand in order to create your world space in a manner in which it feels real. We need to be able to feel as if you can walk around inside this space. This space should feel, yes, it is insane because they have magic. But I know I can step into it and I will be surrounded by it, and it will feel as if I am meant to be here. When there are inconsistencies, when suddenly things change or ramp up, that's when the world stops feeling real and it starts feeling like a work of fiction. And we want to avoid that generally. Bearing in mind, though, you are creating a work of fiction, but it doesn't mean that it should be trashy fiction. So with magic, we need to understand the limitations, we need to understand what its implications are for life and death, and we need to understand who has access to it and how they have access to it. What are the limitations of the magic? Does the magic allow a sorcerer to literally control the very universe and make the world spin, create day and night and all of that kind of stuff? Or is it more on a localized scale, say within a mile radius? Can they lift mountains, or can they basically flick a pebble across the room? The scale at which magic operates is important. And part of that scale is how the magic works. So the magic will allow you to fly. But how? Does it reduce your weight to 0 so that you are buoyant and you float? Does it lift you up using energy? Does it create a bubble around you of negative energy that causes you to float up into the air? And why can you only fly so high? Or why could you only fly so fast? Oh, because that's the limitation of the spell. Spells, by virtue of the fact that they are spells, are implying that they are drawing upon magical forces. If those forces are free-flowing, then there should be no limit to what the spell could do. The spell wouldn't have a limitation. Think of it this way. You have a swimmer in a swimming pool, and they are swimming as fast as they can. They are doing freestyle. Consider freestyle to be the spell that they have chosen to cast, in amongst the magic which is the water all around them. Now, they can only power through that water as fast as their bodies physically can move, but if the magic is of the mind, let's say, as sometimes it is described, then it would be the speed at which your mind could operate. But the water around the swimmer also is a restriction. It is a limitation. So if the magic is doing the same thing, perhaps the magic is limited insofar as how quickly it can permeate, or it can be assembled, or it can come together. So now we are starting, hopefully you're seeing by my example, to think about magic in a way that is going to give us some constructive, unique properties that we can add to our game. So let us think of magic then as this fluid, this liquid through which normal physical matter will pass easily, but when we then try to manifest it by focusing our minds on it, it can only manifest at a certain speed. This gives us a lot of useful things to work with. What about life and death?
I can bring back the dead.
Mum always said I should raise the family. Ha ha ha. Yeah. Do we need to be able to do that? Do we need to be able to raise the dead? If we can raise the dead, why do assassins exist? If people can't die, is it difficult to bring them back? Does the fluid take a long time to flow back into them, if we're using magic fluid as an example? Or is it quick? Or is it impossible? Or do we need to exchange life forces from this one into that one? Where is the limitation, and what are the implications? If you say yes, magic can bring back the dead. I can animate bones, I can animate clothing, I can animate the floor, why not? I can raise the dead. That's fair. At what cost and how? What are the limitations? If you say magic cannot, impossible, it doesn't work that way. It can animate the corpse because it can animate a blank piece of paper or a sheet, but it cannot give it life. We are making up constraints so that we can have a plausibility about it. Once we've decided on life and death, we then need to decide how exactly do we access this stuff. Where is this ether, this fluid that flows around us, only seen by our mind's eye? If we can only access it slowly at a time, or we can only access as much as we can physically manifest in our minds, in which case training our minds allows us to manifest more. That's fine. If you want a leveling system, that's one way of doing it. It gives you different powers of spells. Multiple casters would be able to manifest more because they can each suck from this magical water that's all around us. You can't have to learn it. This is a challenge, because if you have to learn it, who was the first one who learned how to use magic? No, magic needs to be a fundamental, or it doesn't exist at all. Like air or fire. Fire wasn't invented. Fire has always been around. Fire has always existed. It's just how it was harnessed. Well, that's a different story. You still don't have to read a book in order to know how to make fire. You can find fire just lying around. What are we doing with our learning? How do you get it? Once you've used it, perhaps it's in a moment of desperation, your mind wishes that there would be a blast of fire from your hands. I don't think anyone's ever wished that. I don't think so. I think people have wished that the situation wasn't happening. I wish I wasn't here. So perhaps teleportation magic, perhaps temporal magic would be the first manifestation of magic that would have occurred. The person moved slightly, or somebody else was put in their place, magically teleported there. That would have been the discovery process. Now, it's not important for us to go through that sort of nonsense. We don't have to understand how the species learned to get at magic, don't we? You'd be surprised. Look at our own world history. Look at what has been happening over the last 2,000 years. The parts of the planet that discovered certain magical things like gunpowder. That hasn't had an impact on our planet at all. Nonsense. Following the process of who found what is absolutely vital, because when we get down to dealing with species in a couple of weeks' time, you're going to see it's just as important. Okay, I hope this video has inspired you in some way, shape, or form. Following now is me going through these 3 prompts: limitations, life and death, and accessibility, as an example. So if that's all that you watch on today's video, fantastic. Smack that like button, makes me happy. Thank you very much. And I'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time when we come back to world building. Those of you that are staying with me for the examples, brilliant. Grab your pen, grab your cup of coffee, and let's get to it.